And welcome to chapter 19 of the Screwtape letters. This one begins, "My dear Wormwood, I've been thinking very hard about the question in your last letter. If, as I have clearly shown, all selves are by their very nature in competition, and therefore the enemy's idea of love is a contradiction in terms, what becomes of my reiterated warning that he really loves the human vermin, and that he really desires their freedom and continued existence?" Again, this is a statement of fact of what God really does. Of course, then, Wormwood finds himself backtracking, going, well, I probably couldn't have really fallen into the heresy, the heresy for the devils of actually talking about what it is that love really is. They just can't talk about that in the way that God would want us to. And so he's got all that backtracking. Again, it's one of that great literary device of Lewis, who is writing this as if suddenly now, well, I'm sure you're not going to share this letter with people. I'm sure you have enough sense not to share the mistakes that I have made, as Screwtape is telling Wormwood. He says, the truth is, I slip by mere carelessness into saying that the enemy really loves the humans. That, of course, is an impossibility. He is one being, they're distinct from him. Their good cannot be his. But it's true. All of that is absolutely true. The enemy, God, really loves us. And again, the devils, they can't figure out this concept. That makes no sense to them whatsoever. They just cannot know that mind of God and what the idea of his love is really about. It says, he is one being, they're distinct from him. Because they're separate, they can't possibly can't possibly have the same good, that their good is his. That God wills the good for us, that he wants what's good for us. I say, if that wasn't possible, then we wouldn't have salvation. We probably wouldn't have had creation even if God didn't know what was good for us. We're told the reason one comes to talk as if he really had this impossible love is our utter failure to find out the real motive. What does he stand to make out of them? That is the insoluble question. I do not see that it can do any harm to tell you. This very problem was the chief cause of our father's quarrel with the enemy. We're told when the creation of man was first mooted, and again, we're talking about the fall of man. This is right after the man and the woman committed that sin. At that stage, the enemy freely confessed that he foresaw a certain episode about a cross. This is the reading that we have every year on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. It's the reading from Gospel, that we call even the Proto-Evangelion, the first Gospel, to say that, that the offspring of the woman one day would crush the head of the serpent. That while you nip at his heels, he will step on your head. That one day, even as soon as man had fallen, God was already promising that there would be a redeeming moment in history. He says, our father naturally sought to interview and ask for an explanation. The enemy gave no reply except to produce the cock and bull story about a disinterested love, which he has been circulating ever since. This our father naturally could not accept. He implored the enemy to lay his cards on the table and gave him every opportunity. He admitted that he felt a real anxiety to know the secret. The enemy replied, with all my heart, I wish you did. It was, I imagine, at this stage in the interview that our fathers discussed at such an unprovoked lack of confidence caused him to remove himself an infinite distance from the presence, with a suddenness which has given rise to the ridiculous enemy story that he was forcibly thrown out of heaven. Again, this is Screwtape's take on things. Leaving heaven was strictly the choice of the devils. They made it completely on their own. Well, in a way, it's not untrue. They chose to reject God. Of course, God wasn't going to have anything in heaven that was rejecting him. That's not what heaven is. And so because of that, we see that the devils left heaven. Again, we're told, we know he cannot really love. Nobody can do it. It doesn't make any sense. Again, the devils are just never going to figure out what love is. Screwtape writes, "You complain that my last letter does not make it clear whether I regard being in love as a desirable state for a human or not. But really, Wormwood, that is what the sort of question one expects them to ask. Leave them to discuss whether love or patriotism or celibacy or candles on the altar or teetotalism or education are good and bad. Can't you see that there is no answer? Nothing matters at all except the tendency to give to a given state of mind in given circumstances to move a particular patient at a particular moment nearer to the enemy or nearer to us." Again, this is that idea I think I've already referenced, of the idea of a tool. You take a hammer. You can take a hammer and you can hammer in a nail. Or you can take a hammer and you can hammer in somebody's head. Hammering in a nail, that's doing good. That's doing what the hammer is made for. To hit somebody in the head with it, not a good thing, especially if you're the person getting hit with the hammer. And so when we see that, the hammer is a tool. The hammer is neither good nor bad. And so again, the idea is that falling in love or being in love is neither good nor bad. It depends on what happens with it. Again, for most of the world, being in love is the thing that leads them to marriage. But again, being in love could be also the excuse to do whatever you want outside of marriage. So it can be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. Again, it all depends on how it's used. Wormwood is told, "Thus it would be quite a good thing to make the patient decide that love is good or bad." Again, love is neither, in a way. If he's an arrogant man with contempt for the body, really based on delicacy but mistaken for him by purity, and one who takes pleasure in flouting what most of his fellows approve, by all means, let him decide against love. Instill in him an overwhelming asceticism, and then when you have separated his sexuality from all that might humanize it, weigh on him with some much more brutal and cynical form. Again, the idea that if you just think love is totally removed from the possibility of relationships, it could turn into conquest. Because we're going to have a need for relationships. Human beings are built for relationship. Again, we're modeled on God, who is a relationship of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We said, if on the other hand, he is an emotional, gullible man, feed him on the minor poets and fifth-rate novelists of the old school until you have him believe that love is both irresistible and somehow intrinsically meritorious. This belief is not much help, I grant you, in producing casual unchastity, but it is an incomparable recipe for a prolonged, noble, romantic, tragic adulteries, ending, if all goes well, in murders and suicides. Failing that, it could be used to steer the patient into a useful marriage. What he's talking about here is this whole overly romanticized idea of what love is. And again, the problem with that is sometimes people continue to have that idea that my soulmate exists out there. I warn the couples that are preparing for marriage, there is no such thing as a soulmate. There are probably 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 people in this world with whom you could be happy the rest of your life. However, you are choosing this person. You're choosing your fiancé. Then in marriage, you're choosing your spouse to be the person, to be the one and exclusive and only person. Because the way this plays out otherwise is people start to say, you know what, I'm not happy. So obviously, this person wasn't my soulmate, so it must be somebody else. I'll start looking somewhere else, looking to other people in order to try to find that soulmate, rather than trying to stick and say, this is the person that I've chosen. This is the person that I'm here with. Wormwood is told, though the enemy's invention, marriage has uses. There must be several women in your patient's neighborhood who would render the Christian life intensely difficult for him, if only you would persuade him to marry one of them. Ask for a report next time you write on who might be good people for this. In the meantime, get it quite clear in your own mind that the state of falling in love is not in and of itself necessarily favorable to us or to the other side. It is simply an occasion which we and the enemy are both trying to exploit. Like most other things which humans are excited about, such as health and sickness, age and youth, war and peace, it is from the point of view of the spiritual life, mainly raw material. Again, it's going to be how it's used. It isn't the thing in and of itself. Once again, any questions? There may have been in that last one. Again, that was I think one of the more challenging chapters along the way. But, please let me know. Send me an email and I'll answer your questions as best I can.